Hello, you're on the Ruslan Belov channel. Today we'll examine the situation in Ukraine as of August 8, 2025. The day has been rich in events, so let's get straight to the point. We'll start with the northeastern regions of Ukraine, specifically the Chernihiv and Sumy oblasts. From this direction, numerous objective control videos have been received showing that the Russian side is actively conducting reconnaissance. During these operations, Ukrainian armed forces positions are being detected, including locations of drone operators. Judging by the situation, the Ukrainian side had planned to use these drones for strikes deep into Russian territory. In one video, for example, several vehicles, including a truck, arrived at a small clearing, after which Ukrainian soldiers began preparing it for launching drones to strike targets in Russia. However, shortly after this position was spotted, it was struck by an Iskander missile. Notably, the Russian army's reaction was both rapid and decisive, and this was not the only target hit that day. Several other objectives were located near the village of Birin. The footage shows engineering equipment, a large number of vehicles, and AFU personnel. It appears that the Ukrainian army intends to establish strong defensive positions in this area and create another defensive line in the country's northeast. The Russian forces, in turn, are actively destroying equipment and positions to prevent the organization of a layered defense. This sector will clearly remain under close observation in the future. Moving on, the Sumy axis. Here, Russian aviation activity has noticeably increased near the settlements of Kachkarivka, Novosich, Malakachkarivka, as well as Varachini and Yablunivka, already under Russian control. Aviation is delivering numerous strikes on forested areas and belts, while tube artillery is conducting intense shelling. The situation here strongly resembles events around Kondrativka, when Russian aviation and artillery first carried out heavy strikes around the forest perimeter, and weeks later the Ukrainian side was able to launch a counterattack and retake the settlement. Following that logic, it can be assumed that AFU Commander Syrsky is concentrating significant forces in this area. In the coming days, Ukrainian counterattacks can be expected toward Alexeyevka, Yablunivka and Belovody. Some sources claim that about 15,000 fresh troops have been redeployed here, theoretically enough to launch an offensive and attempt to reclaim part of Sumy region. This sector should also be kept under close watch. Now to the Kupiansk direction, starting with the southern Kupansk-Lyman sector, where Russian offensive actions have reportedly intensified. On the northern flank, in the areas of Karpivka and Sredne, pro-Russian sources report that Russian forces have improved their positions. Specifically, they managed to cross the Nitrius River and secure several locations, opening the possibility of taking control over its northern part and the Ukrainian bank, thus creating conditions for a future assault on Lyman. Regarding Lyman itself, the Rubicon unit released footage showing dozens of strikes on Ukrainian equipment and infrastructure, relays, antennas, and navigation systems used by FPV operators to attack Russian assault aircraft. After these objects were neutralized, Russian troops advanced in the Torska area. We won't examine the video that has spread online due to graphic content, but it is known that assault groups on motorcycles attempted to break through the defenses, reach the eastern outskirts of Zarechny, land troops, and establish positions on the Ukrainian bank of the Zherebets River. According to the Ukrainian side, around 30 motorcycles were used in the attack, but up to 80% of them were destroyed, and the surviving personnel took shelter in basements and buildings, trying to hold positions in Zarechny. If Russian forces manage to secure a foothold and push Ukrainian units out, a full-scale battle for Lyman from the east will begin. A bit further east, in the Serebryanka forestry, Ukrainian troops are rapidly losing positions they had held since 2022. Several partial encirclements have already been created, and if the pace continues, the entire forestry area up to Yampol could fall under Russian control before winter. The positions of Lyman, Siversk, and Yampol are interconnected, and Russian advances are taking place at multiple points simultaneously. In the Siversk area, shelling is recorded daily, creating the impression that preparations for an assault are complete, but the Russian army seems to be in no hurry, likely waiting for operations in the Serebryanka forest to conclude and for positions near Zarechny to be fortified. Finally, we move to the Kostantinovka sector, where the key developments are occurring around the Kupansk reservoir. Just yesterday, we noted major map changes near Costantinovka. That was when the first confirmations appeared of Ukrainian FPV drone strikes on Russian assault vehicles, indicating the presence of Russian troops in the remnants of this settlement. There were also reports of the clearing of AFU strongpoints along roads 0522 and 0516. Today, this information was supplemented by independent cartographers. A pocket, or at least an operational encirclement, has effectively formed in the area. At the moment, Ukrainian forces still have the possibility to retreat via Kupansk and the forest strip along the reservoir, dispersing along the shoreline or basing themselves in the vicinity. Looking at the current map, one can see that the situation has changed drastically in just a couple of days. On August 6th, positions looked different, but by the evening of August 7th, the first evidence emerged that Russian units had secured part of Costantinovka's territory. Ukrainian FPV drone strikes were aimed not at random targets, but specifically at assault vehicles, confirming active Russian operations within the settlement. Today, more detailed reports have confirmed the clearing of fortifications along the key 0522 and 0516 routes. Independent and Western-oriented cartographers analyzing the new data have noted that what we are seeing could amount to the formation of a full-fledged encirclement, or at least an operational one. The Ukrainian army still has the option to pull units out through a corridor via Kupansk and the adjacent forest along the reservoir's edge. According to available information, some forces are retreating to a base near the shore, while others are dispersing into the wooded areas. It is important to emphasize that this zone holds significant tactical value. If Russian forces manage to completely seal this pocket and cut off escape routes, Ukrainian troops will either have to break out in combat or abandon equipment and supplies to escape in small groups. Meanwhile, reports indicate active Russian artillery and drone activity on the southern face of the Kupansk reservoir as well. Here, the Russian side appears intent on both pinning down Ukrainian forces in defensive positions and preventing reinforcements from being sent to Costantinovka. Assessing the overall picture, it seems that in the Costantinovka sector, the Russian army is pursuing a step-by-step strategy of forming small and medium-sized encirclements, gradually pushing Ukrainian forces out of fortified areas. This method allows them to avoid prolonged frontal assaults, minimize their own losses, and steadily wear down the enemy's defenses. At present, developments around Kupansk and Costantinovka can be considered pivotal for the entire front line in this direction. If the operation succeeds, Russia will not only expand its control zone on the reservoir's western bank, but also threaten the rear of Ukrainian positions further south. After withdrawing overland from the encirclement, Ukrainian units are reportedly crossing the Kupansk reservoir in ordinary boats, heading north where an evacuation point is believed to be located. Whether the evacuation is conducted from the northern bank or elsewhere remains under discussion. But one thing is certain: the Kupansk pocket has very little time left. The countdown is now in days, perhaps weeks. Everything depends on the current priorities of the Russian army's command. But the question of if this will happen is no longer relevant. The only question is when. ChatGPT said, next, attention shifts to the H-32 highway. Here, Russian armed forces units continue their offensive. Today, new geolocated footage from the areas of Poltavka and Rusin Yar was published by Ukrainian sources. These clips show FPV drone strikes against Russian troops advancing north toward the settlements of Sofiivka and Novopoltavka. Based on this footage, analysts have adjusted the combat map. At the same time, some pro-Russian sources claim that Rusin Yar has already been completely cleared. Despite the modest size of these villages, their importance is hard to overestimate. Control over Poltavka and Rusin Yar would give the Russian army access to open operational space. Once these points are taken, the nearest AFU positions would be no less than 6 kilometers away. For the Ukrainian side, this creates a serious problem. Organizing an effective counterattack across open fields is virtually impossible, especially under conditions of active strike drone operations. For the Russian forces, however, further advancement north will also be difficult. It is possible that, at this stage, the main objective is different: to secure the flanks, strengthen defenses, and act on a larger scale toward Pokrovsk and its urban cluster. The northeast direction is also producing news. Yesterday's maps showed positions here as stable, but today there are reports of the Krasnaya Limanskaya mine being cleared and near total control over Zapovednoye. There is also information about Russian reconnaissance and sabotage groups moving through Dorozhnaya. Moreover, Ukrainian sources report the appearance of such groups on the outskirts of Dobropolye and in the Zolotoy Kolodez area. Given that these points are located 5 to 15 kilometers from the previous front line, it is becoming clear that the Ukrainian defense here has gaps. A shortage of manpower means that some sectors are poorly covered, allowing saboteurs to penetrate deep into the rear. This, in turn, means that regular units could quickly follow them into these areas. Thus, the front northeast of the Pokrovsk agglomeration continues to weaken. At the same time, fighting is taking place inside the agglomeration itself. Today, new map markers appeared in the central and southwestern parts of Pokrovsk. Footage from the area shows movements, presumably of Russian saboteurs, near Malevich Street. It is clear that Russian forces are avoiding a frontal assault on the city's southern citadel, instead, preferring a northern bypass likely to reach Shosinaya Street, a key transport artery connecting the southern part of the city with territory still under Ukrainian control. If this road is cut, a mass withdrawal of Ukrainian units from the southern citadel is likely, possibly with breakout attempts. According to some cartographers, the defense here is already coming apart at the seams. Russian saboteurs have penetrated most of the buildings and are clearing them floor by floor. Just yesterday, this part of the city was considered securely held by the AFU, but today control is being contested for the first time. If the current pace continues, the situation could be resolved in the shortest possible time. On the South Donetsk axis, the Vostok Group's forces continue their methodical advance, moving from one settlement to another. The offensive is supported by drones and aviation. Russian forces are pushing toward Novopavlivka in the north and toward Pokrovska and Huliaipol in the west. In the Zaporizhzhia sector, heavy fighting is underway for Stepnohirsk. Here, the Russian army has moved strike drone operators closer to the front line to clear the area. It is likely that further movement north will only begin once full control over Stepnohirsk is established. Looking at the bigger picture, in addition to the combat operations, diplomatic developments have also drawn attention. Today, Russian President Vladimir Putin held a series of phone calls with the leaders of Belarus and Kazakhstan, as well as representatives of China and India. According to sources, during these conversations, a meeting with Donald Trump's special envoy, Mr. Witkoff, was discussed. Judging by the tone of the reports, these talks are being viewed as a significant achievement. It is expected that a direct meeting between Putin and Trump could take place next week. If such negotiations do occur, it could indicate that the special military operation is approaching its final stage.